Welcome to Buried Evidence, a true crime podcast. I'm your host, Katie. This episode contains graphic descriptions of violence and mature subject matter that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is part 3 in the killing of Travis Alexander. Life or death? When I started researching this case, I thought I already knew all that there was to know about it. A jealous ex-girlfriend murders her ex-boyfriend and lies to try and get away with it. But this case is so much more than that. To prepare for this case, I had to sit through countless hours of trial footage. I've handpicked clips from the trial that I feel will help tell this story, and I'm breaking up this part of the story into 2 final episodes so I can cover the trial with the depth that you, the listener, deserve. Opening statements began in the state of Arizona versus Jodi Ann Arias on January 2nd, 2013. Jodi Arias was on trial for first-degree murder for the killing of Travis Alexander, and the state was seeking the death penalty. In this episode, I'm going to take you through some of the testimony given during the trial, focusing on Jodi Arias' testimony. The trial lasted nearly 4 months, with multiple witnesses and hundreds of hours of testimony, of which Jodi herself testified for a full 18 days. If you've never had an opportunity to watch a trial in the U.S., this episode will give you a glimpse inside the courtroom. I'm going to give you an additional warning that some of the testimony may be difficult to listen to or particularly triggering for those sensitive to discussions of sexual abuse and pedophilia. Prosecuting attorney Juan Martinez opened the trial by methodically laying out the state's case, demonstrating to the jury that what they will find is that Jodi Arias acted with premeditation in the killing of Travis Alexander.
The person who committed this killing sits in court today. It's the defendant, Jodi Ann Arias. And the person that she done it to is an individual by the name of Travis Victor Alexander, a former boyfriend of hers, an individual that she was in love with, an individual that was a good man, an individual that was one of the greatest blessings in her life. And this love, well, she rewarded that love for Travis Victor Alexander by sticking a knife in his chest. And you know, he was a good man, according to her. And with regard to being a good man, well, she slit his throat as a reward for being a good man. And in terms of these blessings, well, she knocked the blessings out of him by putting a bullet in his head during one event that occurred on June 4th of 2008. Detective Steve Flores of the Mesa Police Department received a telephone call from somebody wanting to help. This person here called him up, wanted to help him out, and started to talk about how their relationship with Travis Alexander, how she was in Yreka, California at this time this happened, and could not have had anything to do with this at all. She was asked, well, you know, does Mr. Alexander have any guns? Oh, no. Mr. Alexander has no guns whatsoever. All he could do for him to defend himself, all he had was his fist. How about knives? Did he have any knives? Oh, no knives. Oh, not Mr. Alexander. He didn't have any of that. Not Travis. So she's telling them he didn't have a gun there, so that the killers, whoever they were, according to her, brought them with them. The other thing that she says is that, well, you may want to start looking. She gives him a lead. You may want to start looking at one of his roommates, a guy by the last name of Brown, Thomas Brown. That's who you really need to look at, because, you know, if you're really looking for people, that's the person who you may want to look at, because I wasn't there. According to her, the last time she was there was in April of 2008. So how could it be her, since this happened on June 4th, 2008? So it really couldn't have been her. Well, at that time, of course, the police know. They've seen photographs. They already know they got fingerprints there. So they know that perhaps isn't the truth. Well, they know it isn't the truth. It's not a perhaps proposition. This detective keeps talking to her. And she says, you know, it really wasn't me. I didn't have anything to do with it. And describes this relationship that she had with Mr. Alexander. The police need to do something with that, because she has made it a point of saying she wasn't there. I couldn't have possibly been there. And so they start looking further at a possibility of where she was and that sort of thing. And one of the things that they're able to discover is that a week before this killing on June 4th of 2008, on May 28, 2008, there was a burglary report. Seemingly unrelated to this case, there was a burglary report up in Wairika, California, where she was, May 28, 2008. And the burglary, the police responded sometime around 3:30 in the afternoon of May 28th, which was about a week before Mr. Alexander was killed. And they responded to a house on Pine Street, the house where the defendant was living back on May 28th of 2008. And police did talk to the defendant about it, and there were items that were taken during this burglary. But according to the officer that responded, Kevin Friedman of the Wairika Police Department, well, there's something not right about this burglary. I mean, maybe the entry, there was a little bit of a problem. It was just like they were very careful how they entered. They opened the drawers, but, there were items that clearly were of value that they didn't take. And, well, it just didn't seem quite right. When he went there were two people there, the grandparents, but the defendant wasn't there. She was called and showed up and indicated that she had been the last person there and had been there as late as approximately 1 p.m. And the burglary was reported sometime around 3:30. So it happened between 1 and 3:30 p.m. And the defendant reported, oh, yes, there was some items that were taken of mine. There was a $20 bill and a $10 bill, so there was $30 that were taken of mine. And, luckily for me, before I left, I was able to hide my laptop underneath some dirty clothing. So just in case somebody came in and, wanted to steal stuff, they didn't take my laptop. And thank God I did that because they didn't take my laptop. Well, those were some of the things that were taken and some of the things that weren't taken. But one of the things that was taken was a .25 caliber handgun belonging to the grandfather. And this is just a week before the killing. And it matched in the sense that it's the same caliber, the .25 caliber casing that is labeled number 1, and it's found by the sink. Well, the police looked at that and knew that there was a time, it was very close in time. The other thing that police were able to find was that on that same day, May 28th of 2008, at 9:25 p.m., the defendant sent an email. And she sent an email to Travis Alexander. And she mentions that he's going to Cancun. That's the first mention there is in any of their correspondence, whether it be text messaging, whether it be emails or instant messaging, of Cancun. She indicates that she knows that he's going to Cancun. It is clear now that he's going to Cancun and she ain't going with him. So that's something that they have. The other thing that they start looking around and they're able to find is that the defendant on June 2nd, which is 2 days before the killing, actually went from Wairika, California to Redding, California, which is maybe 1 to 2 hours away, south. And she went south for the purpose of renting a car. They have car rental agencies in Wairika, but she actually went to a different town that's approximately 90 miles away. And she went to a budget rent-a-car, and she spoke to the agent there. And one of the things that she was able to do is rent a car. But again, it was not in her town, and it was in a place that's far away. And the person who rented the car to her, well, he was shown a photographic lineup. And he said, and asked whether or not he saw the person that he rented the car to. He said, oh yeah, there she is, right there, the defendant. He said, but, the photograph that you're showing me, she's got black hair. When she came to rent the car for me, she was a blonde. So, it's the same girl, I'm sure of that. But her hair color changed. Her hair color changed from June 2nd to June 4th in the afternoon when she was having sex with Mr. Alexander. So we know that from the photographs. And she rented the car and said she was going to return it on June 6th of 2008. And in fact, she returned it on June 7th of 2008. And there was over 2,000 miles on that car. One of the other things that police were able to do is that they were able to find receipts. And they were able to show that the defendant, in fact, and she readily admits this now, that she did take a trip. She took a trip, but she was going to go to Utah, according to her. She was going to go to Utah because she has a love interest there, or somebody that could potentially be a love interest, by the name of Ryan Burns. And she was going to visit him, not only visit him, but she was also going there to maybe do some marketing with PPL on this Thursday afternoon, which would have been the 5th of June. And so they're able to see that she goes to Southern California, stops at places like Starbucks there in the evening, sometime around 9 o'clock in the evening, and giving her plenty of time to be there the next day. So they're able to see that not only does she have the opportunity, she actually is placed near the area of California, which would have been a short is a relative term, drive to Mesa. So when she says to the police back on June 10th of 2008 that she hadn't been there, well, the police knew now that that was not true, because they could trace her movements. And ostensibly, she indicated that she was going to Utah to meet up with a friend, somebody that she had a romantic interest in, somebody by the name of Ryan Burns. And what Mr. Burns will tell you is that she was supposed to arrive a day earlier. And somehow, for this whole period of time, couldn't get a hold of her. Tried to call her, she wouldn't call him back. We know now that the reason that was is because she was with Mr. Alexander. But she did happen to arrive in the Salt Lake City, Utah area on June 5th, June 5th, which was that Thursday. And as she got there sometime around a little bit before 11 o'clock, Mr. Burns indicated that he had to go to a meeting, and that if she wanted to go with him, that she could follow him in her car, the rental car that she was driving. As they were driving in West Jordan, Utah, an officer with the West Jordan Police Department stopped her in that vehicle. And the reason they stopped her in that car was because there was a problem with her license plate. There are 2 plates that are required in Utah, and in fact, there are 2 plates that are provided and required in California. So when the car was rented, there was a front plate and there was also a back plate. Well, the car that she was driving did not have a front plate. So between the time that she rented it and the time that she was stopped, somebody took that plate off. Additionally, the reason that she was stopped is that the plate in the back had been turned upside down. And so the police officer stopped the car, and he will come in. His name's Michael Gaglietti, and he will tell you that the person that was driving the car was the defendant. And she provided some story about being at Starbucks, and that somehow some of the kids were trying to play a trick and took the license plate off the car and put one of the license plates inside the car, and then somehow turned the other license plate upside down. Well, she continues on with Mr. Burns, and then at some point the meeting is over. They go back to his place. And what seems to be something with her is that the inevitable happens. They do begin to become engaged amorously. They begin to kiss. They begin to get involved in that sort of fashion. And Mr. Burns will tell you that, yes, they did go further than that. And in fact, he will say that he had his hands between her legs. And he will also say that the reason that they didn't go all the way or continue on to sexual intercourse is because he's Mormon. And his teachings, which I've been telling you about, do not allow for that sort of behavior, if you will. And so it wasn't that the defendant was stopping him, it was that he decided not to go any further than that. And then the police also determined that the car was finally returned on the 7th of June back to the budget rent-a-car in Redding, California. Well, the police, now knowing that there was this trip that was planned, they have the photograph. They now have the DNA, and they also have the fingerprints, arrested the defendant for the first-degree murder of Travis Alexander. And as part of that process of the arrest, the police conducted or spoke with the defendant. And of course, prior to speaking with the defendant, they admonished her of the Miranda warnings. They talked to her about what the Miranda warnings were, and she agreed to speak with them. And these are videotaped. And this was on June 15th of 2008. And they arrested her while she was in this home on Pine Street, the home that she lived there with her grandparents, the home where there was this burglary on May 28th of 2008.
In contrast to the state's case, the defense opened by addressing the many lies that Jodi Arias told in interviews with police and alleged that she was a victim of domestic abuse who acted in self-defense when she killed Travis Alexander.
Jodi had to make a choice. She would either live or she would die. Jodi did not always tell the truth about what happened that night. She was scared. Scared about what had happened and scared about what she had done. She had absolutely no experience with police interrogation before. And so when they talked to her, she wasn't always truthful. Her fear and her panic about what had happened led her to tell different stories. But you will learn that what she said, those stories, were not the truth. Throughout this trial, you will learn more about Jodi Arias, much more about Jodi. You will find that she is an articulate, bright young woman who is a very talented artist and photographer. But most of all, what you'll learn is that Jodi loved Travis. And so what would have forced her to have to take Travis's life on that awful day? In order to answer that question, we have to go back to the beginning. It really appeared like they were involved in a very loving and healthy relationship. But nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, behind the smiles in these photographs, there was a whole nother reality for Jodi, a reality that Travis created. Because in reality, Jodi was Travis's dirty little secret. From the moment, despite projecting himself as a good and virginal Mormon man, someone who was a temple member, from the moment he met Jodi, he was pushing and pushing her to have a sexual relationship with him. And it took just about a week, because the weekend that they met at Chris and Sky Hughes' house, he got what he wanted. As Travis would explain to Jodi, oral sex really isn't as much of a sin for him as vaginal sex. And so he was able to convince her to give him oral sex. And later in their relationship, Travis would tell her that anal sex really isn't much of a sin compared to vaginal sex. And so he was able to persuade her to allow him to have anal sex with her. Being a temple member and an executive director of Prepaid Legal, outward appearances would be very important to Travis. And so while he continued this facade of being a good and virginal Mormon man, he was inwardly dealing with his own sexual issues. And in Jodi, he found somebody who was easily manipulated and controlled. Someone who would provide him with that secretive sexual relationship that he needed. While on the outside, he can still pursue the appropriate Mormon woman. Jodi wanted nothing but to please Travis. And in doing that, at some points during their relationship, he would tell her, you really, maybe you ought to see somebody else. But the moment that Jodi would ever even text another man or talk to another man, Travis would instantly degrade her, yell at her, embarrass her, and humiliate her. And so Jodi learned very quickly how to deal with Travis's temper. She learned how to deal with his temper by being humble, compliant, and agreeable. And that was one good way to help avoid his temper. Jodi officially broke up with Travis in June of 2007. And this June of 2007 she broke up with him because she found out that despite having sex with Jodi and saying things like he loved her, he was pursuing other women. And so because of that, Jodi broke up with him. But Travis didn't want to break up. Travis begged her for forgiveness. And even though they were considered officially broken up, they never stopped seeing each other. They never stopped talking with each other or emailing or texting. Now, at the time that they broke up, Jodi was living in Big Sur, California, and Travis was living in Mesa, Arizona. In July of 2007, Travis sent Jodi a poem that basically apologized for his behavior and asked her to be with him. Later in July of 2007, Jodi actually flew out to see Travis in Mesa and spent the weekend with him. That weekend sealed the deal because Travis showered her with attention, was nothing but sweet and kind. And so shortly after that, Jodi moved from Big Sur, California to Mesa, Arizona. She moved in with a girlfriend of hers she knew from the Mormon church. Now, despite the attention that Travis paid to Jodi in private, he treated her far differently in the public eye. You'll hear how Travis degraded Jodi to his friends. You'll hear that he often referred to her as a stalker or claimed that she was crazy. And if she did anything like speak with another man or text another man, he would further degrade her by calling her names. Names like slut and whore. He would text her these things and email her these things. The more that Travis distanced himself from Jodi to his friends, the easier it was for him to keep control of her and to keep for his own sexual needs. Now, the best evidence of Travis's manipulation of Jodi is his insistence to others that Jodi stalked him. His insistence to others that Jodi wouldn't leave him alone. But yet it was always at his demand and his beckoning that Jodi spent time with him. In fact, at one point during their relationship, Travis even had a t-shirt made. A t-shirt made proclaiming his ownership of Jodi. Now, I know that in some circles, and certainly in some relationships, maybe that would be considered cute or funny. But if you understand the inner workings of the relationship between Travis and Jodi, that t-shirt is a perfect example of how Travis treated Jodi. In April of 2008, Jodi had had enough because Jodi found out that once again, Travis was pursuing other women. Even though he was having her in his bed, Travis was still pursuing other women, and in April 2008, Jodi had enough. She moved from Mesa, Arizona, back to California, to Wairika, which is where her grandparents live. Even though she moved, Travis didn't let her go. He continued emailing, texting, and calling. He guilted her about leaving him. And the thing is, with the type of relationship that they were in, the minute that Travis was nice to Jodi and caring to Jodi, she fell right back into that relationship with him. And so even though she left and moved states, they still continued to talk and email and text. In fact, even though they didn't see each other from April of 2008 until June of 2008, Travis was still able to use Jodi for his own sexual desires through the phone and phone sex. You'll actually hear a recorded phone call between Travis and Jodi that's very explicit. And this phone call is made just a couple of weeks before Travis dies. It's clear in this phone call that the both of them are talking about how they're going to find somebody and marry someone else. Jodi very clearly knows that Travis is not going to marry her, and she's not going to marry Travis. And they discuss it. Travis talks about how he's going to Cancun with somebody else. Jodi knew that, and she expresses absolutely no dismay about it whatsoever. And this is just weeks before he dies. Most importantly, when you hear this call, it's crucial to understand the difference between the type of person that Travis portrayed himself to be versus the things that he said on this recorded call. Because while he was supposed to be this virginal Mormon man who didn't want to have any type of relationship with Jodi and she just wouldn't leave him alone, in this phone call he talks about his fantasies. His fantasies with Jodi of tying her to a tree and putting it, forgive me, in her ass all the way. That's Travis. And then, when Jodi pretends to climax during this phone call, Travis tells her that she sounds like a 12-year-old girl who was having an orgasm for the first time. And then he tells her, "It's so hot." These comments are not comments of a man who is being relentlessly stalked and who does not want to have any contact with Jodi. These are comments of a man who has a real problem with the comparison to the person he portrays himself to be and who he's supposed to be versus the person, his own private reality, and the person who he really was. So, what would have forced Jodi? It was Travis's continual abuse. And on June 4th of 2008, it had reached a point of no return.
Jodi and her defense team launched an all-out assault on Travis Alexander's character and fueled the ongoing media circus that the trial had become by entering into evidence X-rated photos, a raunchy sex tape, and allegations that Travis was not only physically and verbally abusive toward Jodi, but that he was also a pedophile. As for the physical abuse, Jodi testifies that Travis had hit her and body slammed her, injuring one of her fingers in a fit of rage and choked her. In one awkward moment, while Jodi is testifying, her defense attorney begins to ask Jodi about her baptism. She describes the visit and talks about a sexual encounter that happened while Travis was in town, before her attorney abruptly transitions his questioning to a photo Jodi received 2 weeks before the baptism.
Now, when were you baptized into the Mormon Church?
November 26th,
So, of what year?
2006.
So this would have been, was this and who baptized you?
Travis baptized me.
This visit you're mentioning, was that when he baptized you, or was this a distinct visit?
No, this was a distinct visit. It was right before Thanksgiving.
Okay. Were you baptized before or after Thanksgiving?
After Thanksgiving, I think was on the 22nd that year. Well, the 26th would have been on a Sunday, so whatever the previous Thursday was.
Okay. This meeting then was at your home in Palm Desert?
Yes, I think it was the day before, on the Wednesday.
Okay. The day before Thanksgiving?
Yes, right before Thanksgiving, so probably Wednesday.
Okay. And where did you wind up meeting him?
He came to my house with his dog.
Was Daryl still living in the house at this time?
I think Daryl was still living in the house, but he was at work.
Okay. So tell us about what happens when he arrives at your home.
Well, this was the first time he had seen my house, so I just walked him around the property briefly. It's not a big property, but he wanted to see the pool. His dog jumped in the pool and sank right to the bottom, so that was scary. I guess pugs don't swim. So he jumped in with his clothes and everything on to save his dog, and I took him and we put him inside so he wouldn't do that again. So Travis was soaking wet at that point, so he took a hot shower because in November the pool is freezing. And I threw his clothes in the dryer so that they would dry off and warm up. And we were intimate again, and then we said goodbye.
You said intimate. How were you intimate?
I don't recall exactly. It would have been oral sex or the grinding. Again, that's all we were doing at that point.
During this particular encounter, did he again ask you to have anal sex with him?
Yes.
But no anal sex took place on that day?
No, it was more like teasing, and I said no.
Did he ejaculate?
Yes.
And after he ejaculated, he left?
Shortly thereafter.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Ms. Arias, I want to show you what has been marked
As exhibits 393 and 394. Be so kind as to take a look at those. Do you recognize those?
Yes.
What are those pictures of?
Those are pictures of Travis's erection.
And when did you, or how did you come into possession of these photos?
They were sent to me
How?
via his phone.
Via a text message or picture message?
Picture message. His phone to my phone.
Your Honor, I move to admit exhibits 393 and 394.
Judge, on that foundation, if we could get a date on it.
Sustained?
Ms. Arias, would you like to see the photos again in terms of the day that they were received?
I think I remember the day.
Or let me have you take a look then and see if you can tell us the day that they were received. You recall now?
Yes.
Does that date on the photo reflect the date that you received it?
Yes, that would have been a Saturday.
And this was before he came to your home in Palm Desert?
Yes.
Your Honor, I would again move to admit exhibits 393 and 394.
Yeah, what's the date? Somebody could just announce it.
But Jodi, what day was it that you received them?
It was November 11th, 2006.
I'm sorry.
I can look at it. The exhibit. No objection.
393 and 394 are admitted.
Permission to publish, Your Honor?
Yes.
Now, you said this came to you via phone message. Is this something that you had solicited from him?
Not directly. I didn't expect a photograph, but we were flirting.
You were what?
Flirting?
That is a picture of his erection that he sent you, is that right?
Yes.
And you were saying you were flirting. What do you mean by flirting?
I was in Anaheim, at the Anaheim Grove, and I was at a Super Saturday for that area. and I was listening to the speakers, and we began to text, and we were just text messaging back and forth. It turned flirty, and then it turned sexual, and it went on for hours, actually. Just back and forth, just trying to be witty and top each other's last comments.
And in that regard, in order to top your last comment, he sent you this picture?
That actually culminated at the restaurant after we left the Grove. He wasn't there, he was in Mesa. I was with other people. So we were at the restaurant when my phone beeped. I hadn't received pictures on that phone before. So when I showed I had a message from him, and I opened it and I couldn't find it. And then I realized it was a file that I don't know if I had to open it or go into a different folder to see it. And then I realized what it was. And I shut my phone really quick. It was a flip phone.
Jodi continued to testify to events that happened while she and Travis were together, which painted Travis as a pervert.
Ms. Arias, this event that happened in January 2008, before we go into the particulars of it, do you remember where it occurred?
Yes.
Where?
In his bedroom.
Do you remember the date that it occurred?
It was on a Monday, and it was late January 2008. Okay. I think it was around the 21st.
Okay. What did you see on the 21st or late January of 2008? Or I should say this. What happened on the 21st of January 2008 that changed the course of your relationship with Travis?
Objection, lack of foundation. We could have a time, morning, noon, afternoon.
She can explain the story, Judge.
All right, overruled.
I got off work. I was working at Mimi's Cafe at that point in Mesa. I got off work and came over to his house and helped him. He was loading boxes into the attic. He was just rearranging stuff, he said. So I was helping him. I was just handing them up to him. And we were hanging out for a while. He disappeared in the attic for a minute, so I was waiting for him. And then he kind of popped out and said boo and scared me and laughed about that. And then he came down the ladder and he handed me a little porcelain. It was a white porcelain angel that he had. And he handed it to me and called me an angel and gave it to me, and I thought that was sweet. And so I went and put it next to my purse, which was on the dresser in his bedroom. And we hung out a little bit longer downstairs in his office, and then I was leaving. So I ran upstairs, got my purse, shut the bedroom door after I'd already said goodbye to him, and I left. And then as I was driving back home, I realized I left the porcelain angel there. And Travis I knew he would, just knowing him, he would call me and make me feel guilty about it, or in a joking way, but in a way that I wouldn't live it down for a while.
So what did you do?
So I thought of getting it later, but because of that pattern, I turned around to go get it. And I called him real quick on his cell phone, he didn't answer. Called him real quick on his house phone, he didn't answer. I hadn't been gone 10 minutes, so I didn't think it was a big deal. I just went back there, I walked in, and I ran upstairs, and I went into his bedroom to grab it.
And what did you see when you got there?
I walked in, and Travis was on the bed masturbating, and I got really embarrassed. Even though we'd been intimate like more times than I could count, it was just kind of awkward walking in on him like that. And I was headed toward the dresser, but then I stopped, and I was trying to think of something funny or witty to say, like, do you still need my help or something? And he started grabbing at something on the bed, and I realized they were papers. And as he was grabbing the papers, one kind of went sailing off the bed, and it fell in that chaotic pattern that paper falls, and it landed face up near my feet. And it was a photograph.
What was in the photograph? What was the photograph of?
It was a picture of a little boy.
Could you guess how old first the little boy was?
Oh, 5-ish, 5, 6. I'm not a good judge of age.
Did you recognize the little boy?
No.
Was the little boy dressed?
He was dressed in underwear, like briefs.
After you saw this, what did you do next?
I was frozen there for a minute. Well, maybe not a whole minute, but I didn't know how to react. It kind of seemed like one of those dreams where something is really off, but you just can't figure it out. And so I left the angel there on the dresser, and I turned cold, and he called my name, and I just ran. I didn't stay, and I got in my car and started driving home again.
Did you say he called you a name or he called your name?
He called my name.
Okay.
He said, wait. He called my name.
So I'm sorry, you were driving away from his home. How did you feel about what you saw?
I felt nauseated.
Jodi's testimony that she walked in on Travis masturbating to an image of a child was extremely controversial. These allegations added to the media frenzy that already surrounded this case. In addition to these accusations, the defense played for the jury, in open court, a conversation that was secretly recorded by Jodi while she and Travis were engaged in phone sex. The clip you're about to hear is just a small snippet of the call, the part that the defense helped prove their arguments the most.
What else is hot? Naturally, so the way you know that it sounds like you're this 12-year-old girl having her first orgasm. It's so hot.
It sounds like what?
A 12-year-old girl having her first orgasm. Like, horny as possible little girl.
You're bad. You make me feel so dirty.
You are dirty, baby. I think of yourself more because I keep coming in and on. I'm funny, baby. I just want to have a fucking mess with you. I like that term.
The audio was a little bit difficult to understand, so if you didn't catch what Travis said, he tells Jodi, quote, "The way you moan, it sounds like a 12-year-old girl having an orgasm for the first time. It's so hot," end quote. As Jodi continues to testify, her defense team starts asking her questions about the events that occurred in the weeks leading up to Travis's murder. Jodi testifies about the burglary that occurred at her grandparents' house on May 28th of 2008.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you remember your grandparents' home being broken into?
Well, I wasn't there, but yes.
Okay. Do you remember about when that occurred?
Well, I understand it occurred May 28th, 2008.
We heard testimony earlier that eventually you came to the house that day. Do you recall doing that?
Yes,
And do you recall what day that was?
May 28th.
To your recollection, who called you and advised you that the home had been broken into?
I don't know that who called me because someone had called my sister. We were out of cell phone range, and when we came back into cell phone range, her phone beeped because she had a voicemail, so she checked the voicemail, and that's when she said that what had happened, so we went straight home after that.
And where were you when you received the message that your grandparents' home had been broken into?
We were in Hilt. Hilt is a small town about, I think, like an eighth of a mile from the border. It's right on the border. And out of cell phone range, we were at a Buddhist monastery way out there.
You say border, to what border are you referring to?
The Oregon border.
So, and how far, refresh our memory, how far was the Oregon border from Wairika?
15, 20 minutes, depending on how fast you're driving.
Okay. So once you got this message, did you go straight back to your grandparents' home?
Yes.
Okay. Did you break into your grandparents' home to steal this gun?
No.
Did you orchestrate or have someone else break into your grandparents' home to steal the gun?
No, I did not.
We saw testimony and pictures about of your grandparents' home, and that were taken that day. Do you recall seeing those?
Yes.
Is it correct then you simply could have, had you wanted the gun, you could have just opened the cabinet and taken it?
I guess if I'd known it was there, I could have.
Okay. You did not know that they had this pistol?
No, I knew my grandfather had rifles and shotguns, but I didn't know he had a handgun.
When you learned of the burglary, did you learn that a handgun had been stolen, or did you learn that that handgun had been stolen?
Eventually, yes.
Did you know it at the time?
Well, not when I first arrived, I didn't.
Okay. But did your grandfather or grandmother eventually tell you that this happened?
Yes, my grandmother did.
Okay.
On the same day.
Okay.
On the morning of June 3rd, 2008, just before Jodi sets out on a long road trip, she visits her ex-boyfriend Daryl and his son Jack. They have breakfast, and Jodi asks Daryl to borrow a couple of gas cans to take on the trip.
Yes, the next morning I swung by Daryl's apartment in Pacific Grove, which is right next to Monterey, and hung out with him and Jack for a little while.
Okay. And just in case anyone's forgotten, who is Jack to Daryl?
Jack is his only son.
So, do you recall, you said you had breakfast with them, is that right?
Yes, we had omelets.
Okay. And how long did you spend with Jack and Daryl that morning?
Oh, I'd say half hour. We were just hanging out. Jack was getting ready to go to school, and we were just enjoying each other's company.
Okay. And this would have been, do you remember what day this was? Was this the morning of the 3rd or the morning of the 2nd?
I think it was the morning of the 3rd.
Okay. Did you borrow anything from Mr. Brewer while you were there?
Yes, I borrowed his gas cans.
And how many gas cans did you borrow from him?
2.
Why did you borrow 2 gas cans from Mr. Brewer?
So that I could, well, gas in Wairika at that time was $4.78 a gallon for regular unleaded. This is 2008. It's very expensive. All gas in California is a little more expensive because they have stricter regulations. So going to Nevada and Utah would have been cheaper. So I wanted to fill it up.
You didn't tell him keep this a secret?
No.
Okay.
Jodi went on testifying about how she decided to visit Travis.
Was it your intent at that point in time to go to Utah?
Yes. Maybe Death Valley first, but in that direction.
Did you go directly to Utah after you talked to Mr. Burns?
No.
Why not?
I had been talking to Travis intermittently throughout that time, and the weeks prior when he discovered that I was going to Utah, he started saying, why are you going to Utah? Why are you going to Utah when you're going there this summer?
Stained.
Was Mr. Alexander questioning why you were going to Utah?
Yes.
Was it your understanding that he didn't want you to go to Utah?
I don't know. I know he wanted me to go somewhere else, but I don't know if not Utah. I don't know how he felt about that.
What's that?
I know he wanted me to go see him, but I don't know that I don't know how he felt about Utah, except that he was suspicious of it.
Okay. You felt as if he was suspicious of Utah and he wanted you to come see him.
Yes.
And you say these are conversations you'd been having periodically throughout the course of these days on your vacation. Is that right?
Prior to the road trip and during.
And what?
During.
Okay. Did you speak on a daily basis during the road trip?
We spoke on the 2nd and the 3rd. Yes.
Okay. So, going back to what we were talking about earlier, you've got the car full of gas and the gas cans. You're going to Utah. You tell Ryan you're going to Utah. Why do you not go straight to Utah?
The very last time I called Travis, it was kind of like, I don't know how to describe it. He had been very sweet. He had been guilting me, kind of making me feel bad that I was taking this big trip and that I wasn't going to see him. And we had been trying to hook up, and he kept being busy, so he had to postpone his plans to come to Northern California. Since I was driving south, he wanted me to come to Mesa. I told him no the first few times. During one conversation, he became angry. During the others, he stayed calm, but he has this way of like talking in this really sweet voice, kind of like baby talk, and making me feel guilty. And he sounded very sweet. And so when I called him one more time, it was just like, all right, I'm going. So I went.
Okay. Did you ever call Ryan Burns to say, well, I'm not going to be up there, I'm going to be late, anything of that nature?
Prior to calling Travis and deciding to go to Mesa, I called Ryan and let him know that my phone was dying. So I wanted to turn off the battery to preserve the juice, turn off the phone to preserve the battery. And he said, that's fine. So I had started to turn my phone off, but then I called Travis one more time.
Objection, no response. Did she tell him?
She explained what she did. What did you do after you called Mr. Burns?
I started to look for the freeway, and as I was calling Travis.
Okay. Did you, during the last phone conversation with Mr. Alexander in Pasadena, did you advise him that you were coming to Mesa?
That final phone call I did, yes.
And we had talked earlier when you left Redding, California, that with the rental car, that you had a car charger with you when you started off to Monterey. Was that car charger not with you when you were in Pasadena?
I couldn't find it. I called Matt to see if I'd left it at his house. He didn't answer. I called Daryl to see anything, if I brought it there, if there was one there. He didn't answer.
Okay. So you couldn't find it?
I couldn't find it. And my battery was getting low. I didn't want to be without cell phone service or gas in the middle of nowhere driving across the desert in Nevada.
Okay. when you left Pasadena for Mr. Alexander's home in Mesa, did you have a gun with you?
No,
Did you have a knife with you?
no.
What color was your hair?
Kind of like an auburn brown, I'd say.
Didn't stop to dye it along the way?
No.
What time in the evening, to your recollection, did you advise Mr. Alexander that you were going to come to Mesa?
What time in the evening? Oh, I don't remember precisely, but it would have been somewhere after 8 and somewhere before 10 p.m.
Based on your conversation with him, did you have the understanding that he would be expecting you sometime that night or the next morning?
Yes, he said he would wait up.
And how long a drive? You told us earlier that you'd driven out to Travis's home before. Do you know how long a drive it is from Pasadena to Mesa?
I estimated it to be about 6 hours.
And this vehicle you were using, do you recall how far you were getting on a tank of gas?
No, but it seemed to go really fast by the way I was driving.
Okay. Between Pasadena and Mesa, did you need to stop for gas?
Yes, a few times.
And did you buy gas or did you use the gas that was in your cans?
No, I bought gas.
And how did you buy gas?
I bought gas. I had to stop at Desert Center. I bought gas there. And then I had to stop again in Buckeye. And I got gas there, I think at the Shell.
And how did you pay for that gas?
I don't remember. I mean,
Okay. So you stopped for gas twice?
yes.
Okay. So tell us, do you remember about what time you arrived in Mesa?
It was still dark, but it was early morning, maybe around 4-ish.
And is this on the 4th of June, 2008?
Yes.
Jodi's testimony continues as she explains what she and Travis are doing after she arrives at his house in Mesa. She arrived in the early morning hours of June 4th, 2008. Tired from the long trip, they go to bed and wake up in the afternoon. At around 1:45 p.m., the couple wakes up, has sex, and takes nude photos with Travis's new camera. Jodi hangs around while Travis is in his office doing some things on his computer. He was trying to get some images from a CD of their travels, but the CD was all scratched up. According to Jodi's testimony, Travis got angry and took his frustrations out on Jodi. Eventually, things calmed down, and the couple decided to go upstairs for a fun photo shoot of Travis in the shower.
Yesterday when we ended, we were at the point in time on June 4th, late afternoon, early evening hours when you were about ready to depart. You were telling us before you departed, or you and Mr. Alexander had decided to engage in this photo shoot, you called it, right?
Yes.
And this was to take place in his bathroom, right?
Yes.
Okay. Why was the shower area selected?
It was selected for the water. We were going for a certain effect with the pictures and the water.
Okay. When you were in the bathroom, you took these pictures with Mr. Alexander's camera you were telling us yesterday, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. When you were in the bathroom, did you have a gun with you?
No.
Were you holding on to a knife?
No.
So we saw the pictures of him in the shower. Tell us what happens once he gets in the shower.
I'm taking pictures of him. We were trying out different poses. We were
Are you
kind
communicating? Is it
yeah, we were kind of
friendly?
laughing.
Okay.
It was, we were trying out different poses, and then we were checking the photos and deleting them, and then taking a few more and checking them and going through them and deleting them. And at one point, he was sitting, and I was taking pictures. I was probably a few feet from the shower so that the water didn't get on the camera. I was showing him the photos, and we were deleting some. And at one point, when I went to delete the photos, as I moved the camera, it slipped out of my hand. And it didn't like fall right away. I kind of caught it, and then I caught it like a football, like it bounced, and I almost caught it. But it didn't catch it, and it landed on the mat, and then it rolled onto the tile.
And where were you when this took place relative to the shower?
I was crouched by the shower. I might have been on the mat or on the edge of the mat.
Okay. So what happens after you drop the camera?
At that point, Travis flipped out again, and he stood up and he stepped out of the shower and he picked me up. I was crouching, but he lifted me up as he was screaming that I was a stupid idiot. And he body slammed me again on the tile. He told me that 5-year-old can hold a camera better than I can. He was, as he was screaming at me, there was spit coming out, or maybe it was water, but I was getting wet, and when I hit the tile, I rolled over on the side and started running down the hallway. And I don't know why I didn't run out of the room. I ran into the closet because the door was open, was my thought.
When he slams you down onto the ground after you drop the camera, how do you feel?
I was scared. I was thinking, crap, because it's everything that I was trying to avoid downstairs when he started getting mad. I was doing everything I could to avoid that, and I still didn't avoid it. I still screwed it up, and now he's pissed again. So he's freaking out, I'm freaking out. I rolled, like I said, I rolled off to my left and began to run down the hallway, and I could hear him follow. I could hear his footsteps chasing me.
Were you scared when he was chasing you?
Yeah, I didn't want him to grab me again.
What were you scared that he would do?
Who knows? At that point, he had already almost killed me. I wasn't thinking when he almost killed me before that I was going to possibly die. I was just thinking I couldn't breathe, no air. That's all I could think of before I passed out. But it was later on that I realized that I could have died if he just held on to my neck a little longer. So I didn't want that to happen, obviously. So I ran into the closet and I slammed the door, and I intended to run through the opposite end of the door because it has another exit. And as soon as I got in there and began to run, I remembered where he kept a gun. So I grabbed it. I jumped up on the shelf, kept it on the very top. I grabbed it, and then I ran out the other door as he was opening the door. And he ran, chasing me, and I turned around and pointed it at him so that he would stop chasing me.
Jodi, how do we look at that picture, please? How do we get to that point in time? What happened between the time you grabbed the gun?
I don't know how that picture was taken.
I'm not asking you how the picture was taken. I'm asking you what happened at that, in between the time you grabbed the gun and what we see here. What happened?
When I grabbed the gun, I ran out of the closet. He was chasing me. I turned around and we were in the middle of the bathroom. I pointed it at him with both of my hands. I thought that would stop him. If someone were pointing a gun at me, I would stop. But he just kept running. He got like a linebacker. He got kind of low and grabbed my waist. But before he did that, as he was lunging at me, the gun went off. I didn't mean to shoot him or anything. I didn't even think I was holding the trigger. I just was pointing it at him. And I didn't even know that I shot him. It just went off, and he lunged at me, and we fell really hard against the tile toward the other wall, like kind of near the scales or whatever those things are. So at this point, I didn't even know that if he had been shot. I didn't see anything different. We were struggling and wrestling, and he's a wrestler. He had wrestled in high school, and he was getting on top of me. And I didn't want him to get on top of me because when he had done that in the past, I can't get out of those holds that he gets. So he's grabbing at my clothes, and I got up, and he's just screaming angry. And after I broke away from him, he said, "Fucking kill you, bitch." And
Before he lunged at you, was he yelling at you and threatening you?
well, he was chasing me, and he was pissed off.
Okay. Do you remember him yelling or saying anything?
He was calling me names because I dropped his camera.
Okay. Do you remember what those were?
Well, I remember him calling me a fucking idiot, and I remember him telling me that a 5-year-old can hold a camera better than me.
Do you remember saying anything to him as he lunged at you?
I don't think so. I was crying and running, and I pointed it at him, assuming that he would get the idea that to stop. He wouldn't stop.
What do you mean he wouldn't stop?
Well, after the gun went off, I thought, crap, because now he's really going to be pissed. I didn't know that I shot him. I thought I shot a hole in the wall or something, and I'm thinking he's really going to be pissed at me now. So now he's telling me he's going to kill me, and I think after he said that, he had almost killed me before, and...
And what?
There's a lot of that day that I don't remember. There are a lot of gaps. I don't remember the poses of the pictures. I remember them now that I've seen the pictures, but I didn't remember them until I saw them. I remember taking pictures. I just don't remember the pictures themselves, even though we looked at them. And now I see them, I remember them.
Well, let me ask you this, getting us back to that moment in time, not the poses, anything else. You've told us that he said, "Kill you, bitch," and you were underneath him trying to get away.
He said that right after I broke away from him.
Okay, right after you broke away from him. Once you broke away from him, what do you remember?
Almost nothing for a long time. There are some things that have come back over years, but nothing. I don't know if those are things that I'm thinking of from before or if it's that day. It's confusing. There is like a huge gap. Like, I don't know if I blacked out or what. There's a huge gap. And the most clear memory that I have after that point is driving in the desert. But there are certain little things that have come back, like pictures in my mind that have come back since then.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you remember stabbing Travis Alexander?
I have no memory of stabbing him.
Do you remember, as we see here in Exhibit 162, do you remember dragging him across the floor?
Oh. I just remember trying to get away from him.
Showing you Exhibit 73. Do you remember placing him in the shower?
I'm sorry, that's no.
You told us that after running away from him, you don't have any clear memories of what happened after that until hours later, right?
I have a few memories, but nothing super clear.
Okay, tell us about those memories.
I have a vague memory of putting the knife in the dishwasher, but I've put the knife in the dishwasher before, so I'm pretty sure it was that day.
Do you know where you got the knife from?
It was upstairs.
Okay. Are you assuming that, or do you remember that?
I'm assuming that. I don't think it had been touched by either of us since he used it to cut the rope.
What else do you remember from after the time that you crawled out from underneath him?
I remember I was in the bathroom. I remember dropping the knife and it clanged to the tile. It made a big noise. And I just remember screaming. I don't remember anything after that. Not immediately.
Do you remember where he was when you were screaming?
I think he was next to me on the floor. I don't know.
Do you know where you were?
I was in the bathroom.
What else do you remember?
Not much.
Does not much mean nothing?
I remember more the feeling of that time, not pictures and things that I can bring back.
Tell us about the feeling.
It was like mortal terror. It was like I pissed him off the worst I'd ever seen him pissed off. And then I tried to stop him, and then I pissed him off even more. And I thought, shit, I'd really, really pissed him off. And he was angry at me, and he wasn't going to stop.
What do you mean by he wasn't going to stop?
He wasn't going to stop. He wasn't stopping.
When you say he wasn't going to stop, did you fear that he was going to kill you?
For sure. When he said, kill you, yes. He'd almost killed me before, and now he was saying he was going to.
Why did you believe him when he said, kill you, bitch?
Because he'd never said that before, and he'd taken me almost to that point without that threat, and now he was clearly making that threat.
You told us your last memory in Travis's bathroom was sitting on the bathroom floor screaming.
I don't know if I was sitting or what. I just remember dropping it.
Okay. Dropping the knife?
Yes. I remember what was going through my head. I don't remember anything else after that.
What was going through your head?
That I just couldn't believe what had happened, that I couldn't take anything back, what had just happened. And it was like I couldn't rewind the clock. I don't know about all, but I just remember dropping the knife and being very freaked out and screaming.
After remembering that feeling and dropping the knife in the bathroom and some of the other memories you've shared with us, what is the next point in time for which you have a memory? At that point in time, when you were pulling away and driving away, did you have the gun with you?
I don't remember bringing the gun with me, but I remember throwing it
Throwing it where?
in the desert.
What about the rope he had tied you up with? Did you take that with you?
Yes.
And do you remember what you did with that?
Eventually it went into a dumpster.
Where?
It was behind a gas station. I think it was somewhere after St. George. I don't remember. It was getting light out, wherever I was parked at that point.
When you got to this point in time then, did you do so with the full realization of what had happened in the bathroom?
I don't know how full my realization was, but I knew that it was really bad, and that my life was probably done now.
Immediately following the murder, Jodi left Travis's house in a panic, disposed of the gun, knife, and rope, each in different locations. She realized how much trouble she was going to be in if she got caught, and started taking steps to cover her tracks.
There was no reception. As I began to drive, some reception came, like one little bar, and then two, and then one, and then none. And I think I had voicemails. I kept trying to check them, but the reception wasn't strong enough to complete a call. So I don't know if I had text messages or not, but I text.
Why are you interested in your voicemails at this point in time?
Well, I realized at that point that a lot of time had lapsed and that people would probably be wondering where I was. I realized that it was irresponsible of me to just hang out with Travis, but he always was the priority whenever we got together, and so all my other responsibilities just they went to the back burner. So at this point I thought, well, Ryan was expecting me, Leslie was expecting me, all these people are expecting me. I don't even know which way I'm going at this point. I don't even know what I'm going to tell them. Maybe I'll say I got lost. I don't know. I'm just thinking of all these things. So I finally get to this sign where it says Las Vegas is like 100 miles away. So I thought, okay. I had an idea sort of where I was at this point. And then I came upon the Hoover Dam, and there was a checkpoint there. I had to stop, and then they let me go through it. And on the other side of the Hoover Dam, I stopped again and pulled over. And at this point, I realized I was in really deep trouble. And I started thinking of what I could do to delay the inevitable.
Well, let me ask you about that. Your phone was working then? It begets the question, why not just dial 911 and tell them what happened?
I was scared, and I couldn't imagine calling 911 and telling them what I had just done. I didn't want anyone to know that had happened or that I did it. So I started taking steps, or what I could do in the aftermath of it, to try to cover up that I was there. So I did a whole bunch of things to try and make it seem like I wasn't ever there.
Do you remember what those things were?
Yeah, when I pulled over at the Hoover Dam, I thought of, well, I had called Ryan at that point, and Leslie said we called Travis because we thought maybe he would know where you were, because we know that he still talks to you. And so then she said, I've left a voicemail, and I thought, oh, okay, so they're gonna find his voicemail. Maybe I should leave a voicemail. So I called his phone to leave a voicemail. I didn't really know what I was gonna say. I just thought, at this point I told Ryan I got lost, and I told Leslie the same thing. And his voicemail picked up, and I started trying to say that too. But I was crying, and I was trying to make it to sound cheery, but I was crying, and so I would hit pound, and I would listen to that message, and it didn't sound right. So I would delete it, and I would try again, and that one, then I started crying in the message, and that one didn't sound right, so I deleted it. And I would try again, and then I was talking too fast in this one, or I started crying in that one. So finally, I'm frustrated. This call is a long time, and I hit pound again. I erased the message by hitting 3, and then I started recording it again, and then I listened to it that time, and I was like, okay, it's good enough. I'm going to leave that, and so I had that message sent.
So this was your effort to try to act as if you weren't present in Mr. Alexander's home on June 4th?
Yeah, I figured that eventually his voicemails are going to be listened to, and I thought that'll just, throw the scent off for a little while, so to speak.
Okay. So after you make these calls to Mr. Burns, Miss Jodi, and Mr. Alexander's voicemail, what do you do next?
Kept driving past Vegas.
Jodi's direct testimony concluded after 9 days on the stand before prosecutor Juan Martinez began his cross-examination. Juan Martinez had an aggressive questioning style, and in his attempt to demonstrate to the jury how Jodi's acts of deception equated to premeditation, he held nothing back on cross and was often accused of badgering Jodi as well as other witnesses who took the stand. On the next episode of Buried Evidence, a true crime podcast, the courtroom drama continues as we hear prosecuting attorney Juan Martinez spar with Jodi on cross-examination and other witnesses questioned by the state before finally we get the verdict. Thank you for listening, and as always, if you're enjoying the show, please share it on social media, leave a 5-star rating and a review. We'll see you next time.